It's definitely still spooky season, and as a film nerd, I'm still watching those horror classics in my free time. And when I think of iconic horror characters, one of the first icons to come to mind is Chucky. But he really shouldn't. If we're being honest, a killer doll should not be too intimidating just due to his size. Like, realistically, if I see a doll coming at me with a knife, I'm kicking his ass straight to Madagascar with that expedited Prime shipping. But in all seriousness, turning a children's doll into an object to be feared in a long running franchise is extremely impressive, and I think it's largely due to the well crafted premise and story of the first film. Child's Play starts off with an action sequence where the serial killer Charles Lee Ray is on the run from the cops. He eventually gets shot, and it's pretty evident that he's not going to make it out of this chase. When he ends up in a toy store, he breaks out the voodoo and uses a mystic spell to transfer his soul into a doll. This does two things. The first is it introduces the concept of witchcraft/magic into this film, which helps with the overall concept. If we as an audience are going to suspend our disbelief to accept that his soul can be transferred, why not some semblance of his human strength? This then creates a main antagonist who, despite being in a doll's body, has the mind of a serial killer and at least a portion of his strength. The introduction of magic off-rip also braces the audience for the level of suspension of disbelief needed to thoroughly enjoy a film about a killer doll. And rather than lazily going through the motions of a standard slasher film, Child's Play is actually very creative in the ways it uses its concept to create unique throws and kills. Being in the body of a doll, Chucky now has the element of surprise, as many humans are naturally not going to think of a doll as a physical threat. Chucky uses this element of surprise and the additional agility his doll body gives him to his advantage numerous times throughout the film. One of the highlights is when he blindsides Aunt Maggie out the window of an apartment. It's such a great moment because Chucky has slowly built up the suspense by messing around with things around the house, and when he finally manages to lure her towards the window, he simply hits her once and lets gravity do the rest. Other than being an iconic slasher film death scene, the death of Aunt Maggie helps establish Chucky as a real threat, as it shows he has already adjusted to his doll body enough to compensate for its shortcomings, and logically he should only become a bigger threat further and further into the film. Making the main protagonist a child is also a smart move that this film made, as it's definitely more believable that a kid could be manipulated and overpowered by a doll than a full-grown adult. Andy is also just a really lovable character. While the acting isn't superb by any means, I think that actually helps the film, as Andy just feels like an actual kid and acts how I'd imagine a kid would. This gives the film a real feeling to it, which counterbalances the more over-the-top and magical elements really well. Andy is also shown to be a caring and relatively intelligent character despite his age. As at the start of the film, he attempts to make his mom breakfast in bed, and he's actually the first to figure out that Chucky was the one on the counter and potentially killed Aunt Maggie. Though naturally no adult in their right mind is going to believe a child who's claiming that their doll is alive and potentially killed someone. And this is what helps give the film a ton of suspense. It's essentially a race to see if the adults in the film will come around to accepting that Chucky is actually killing people before Chucky manages to put his soul into Andy's body. You see, while it's possible to work around the limitations of his doll body, being in a human body is just preferable. It would make pulling off these kills much easier for Chucky. So the crux of the film really comes down to if he can get out of the doll's body or not. One major criticism that has been lobbied at this film is how durable Chucky is. I mean, he takes some serious damage before being put down in the third act. And I think this criticism is somewhat fair, but it honestly just works to make Chucky more fearsome. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's made out of plastic now, so logically being burned or having a limb or two removed is not going to affect him in the same way. This also forces the human characters to get creative in finding ways to take the doll out, which adds to the uniqueness of the film within the slasher genre. I also think the personality of Chucky is a major pro for this film. Similar to Freddy Krueger, Chucky has a tongue-in-cheek personality that makes him somewhat entertaining and charismatic. Like, despite the fact that he's a serial killer, I just find something about a doll swearing like a sailor to be funny. This also helps to separate him from the stoic horror icons such as Jason and Michael Myers. All in all, Child's Play put a fun new spin on the slasher genre with an out there but fun concept that the film does a really good job of capitalizing on. And it's easy to see why this film has turned into such a large and still alive franchise. as it had a film reboot in 2019 and has an active television series on Sci-Fi that's continuing the original continuity. With an adorable protagonist, a charismatic antagonist that you love to hate, and highly creative death and action scenes, the original Child's Play will forever remain amongst the horror genre's elite. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Child's Play and are interested in further explorations of screen stories, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe. And if you feel like I missed anything, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.